Welcome to the Legalpreneur Podcast. I'm your host, Andrea Sager, and I'm dedicated to covering common legal issues for small business owners and just how some of the world's most elite entrepreneurs have handled legal issues themselves. In true attorney fashion, the information in this episode is not legal advice. This is for informational purposes only, and you should always consult with your attorney before implementing any of the information. Now, on to the show. Welcome back to another episode of the Legalpreneur Podcast. I'm so happy you guys are back today. This interview is jam-packed full of some photography sweetness, if I may say so myself. Today's guest is James Patrick, who has shot over 500 magazine covers and thousands of editorial pieces. He is basically like the go-to fitness photographer. If you are in the fitness industry and you are needing a good photographer, James is the one to go to. In our chat, we talk about how he has leveraged accidental copyright infringement, and he talks about how he uses his past work for passive income now. And that's the goal. I mean, that's the goal for entrepreneurs, is to have passive income. You work hard up front, and then that work continues making you money. And especially because of COVID-19, he hasn't really been able to do much work in regards to having new photo shoots. Well, guess what? Magazines still have to print. They still have to come up with new content. So James has been able to use his past work to still make him money today. So I love this interview. Everything we talked about is so good, and it's so helpful to entrepreneurs, whether you're a photographer or in any other industry. This episode is very, very helpful to get you thinking about passive income. How can you use your past work to still make money, especially in a time like this during COVID-19 when a lot of people are shut down. Now, don't forget, send us a text. Number is 832-225-3164. Just shoot me a text with the word podcast, or just let me know what your questions are. I'd love to hear from you. I want to know what your questions are. What do you want to hear on the podcast? Do you have any questions about trademarks, copyright, small business law? And make sure you screenshot and share this to Instagram. Tag me and James and let me know what you enjoyed most about this episode. All right, welcome to the show, James Patrick. I am so excited to have you on the show because I know the listeners are going to be super pumped to hear about who I like to call a celebrity photographer, or at least a fitness celebrity photographer. So thank you so much for being here.
Andrea, you are so one of my favorite people, and I'm so honored that you and I had a chance to meet. It was about a year ago, and just to see this relationship blossom as it has, just so grateful for you to be in my life, in my business, and excited to have this conversation with you and show up for your audience.
Yes, thank you. I'm super pumped. So let's go ahead and tell the audience a little bit about you. Where do you come from? How did you get to where you are today?
You know, if I were to trace the timeline back far enough, for me, it started with journalism. I was a journalist in school, and the idea was to just stay as a journalist, I guess. And the reason I say I guess is because it was one of those things I did because it was in front of me. Didn't necessarily love it, but it was what was working for me at the time. I was a decent writer, although I did not enjoy reporting. And that was a weird balance I had to carry, which is, okay, I enjoy writing and I'm good at writing. I don't like reporting, but it's what was in front of me. Now, all of a sudden I'm in college, and then the opportunity to become a photojournalist appears in front of me. That was a big pivot for me because now there was something where not only did I love to create imagery, and I figured out how to create compelling images, but it was something where I was just like, oh, this is something I feel a draw to. I really am enjoying this, but I didn't really know any professional photographers at the time. I didn't, it's not like, and then we're also inundated with that ideology of a starving artist. I'm like, well, that doesn't sound appealing at all. So out of college, I took a safe job in marketing, and I spent 7 years working in marketing. But at the same time, I had this photo business on the side that was just kind of itching to break through the surface. And after 7 years at this marketing job, it got to a point where I was running 2 full-time careers. I had my marketing job, but I also had this blossoming photo career, mostly within health, fitness, and wellness, shooting for magazines, ad campaigns. And I just said, you know what? I'm going to go all in. I'm really going to take a chance here. I left my marketing job. I stepped full into my photography business shortly after the recession in 2008, but it took off. It really worked. And over the last, God, that was probably 10 years ago. So let's just say over the last decade, I've then started to build other avenues of my business through, I launched a conference for health and fitness entrepreneurs. I am a coach of health and fitness entrepreneurs, helping them grow and scale their business, as well as a few other miscellaneous business identities surrounded to really just our focus is we create opportunities and we create art for the entrepreneur.
I love it. So before you became an entrepreneur, what did you think about attorneys, if you remember?
I can tell you the first time that I thought about what it would be to work with an attorney. And my biggest hesitation was, one, I'm too small. My business is too small. And I cannot afford that sort of representation. That was the first really iteration. It's like, maybe I'd never be liable for anything, but even if I was, I'm too small and it just seems so expensive. And there's no way I could ever afford that. So that was like, I would say an early iteration of like my opinion of having a lawyer or being represented or even getting involved in that. But I remember there were certain times where I would say, I wish that I had known more about it, because early in my career, there were a few instances where, as a photographer, where I'm starting to see my work be used in ways that I wasn't approving of. That was one. And another was having clients back out on contracts. That was two. And another of clients never even paying for the services that were rendered. So 3 issues. And it was a struggle. It was a frustration, because I'm like, as a freelancer, you work so hard and every dollar matters when you're a freelancer.
Oh, yeah.
And to just see so much of it disappear or get taken advantage of or get stolen when images get used without my permission, it hurts. It hurt a lot.
Yeah, and let's dive into that, because I've actually had someone on the show that talked about how their photos were stolen as well. Let's just hear it again, because the audience needs to hear it over and over, because they need to realize if your photo is stolen, you have recourse.
Mm-hmm.
And if you steal photos, you can be sued.
Yeah.
So I'm sure you've had tons and tons of photos stolen. First of all, how many magazine covers have you shot?
The last time we counted, which was about a year ago, it was over 500. And I haven't counted since then. So I'm imagining I've had maybe 40 since then. So maybe 550, somewhere around there.
Oh my God. Do you guys hear this? He has shot over 500 magazine covers and not had his work featured in just 500 magazine. This is on the actual magazine cover. So his work is everywhere.
If we were to count interior features, those are in the heavy thousands, the high thousands. But yeah, 500 covers. And I became really adept to understanding what images help differentiate and get people to pick up a cover, because you have to honor 2 different things. One, you have to honor the fact that you have to have brand consistency on a cover. If you look at, let's just say Shape magazine, for example, you take 100 issues of Shape magazine, unless there's a massive brand shift like they did about 2 years ago, all the covers are going to look roughly the same. And the reason being is because there has to be enough consistency that people recognize it enough to pick it up. Also, the other facet of that is you have to create something powerful enough that you have brand consistency. That's why they pick it up, but powerful enough. That's why they purchase it. Okay. So it's blending those 2 facets together, and just through, part of it is how I light, part of it is how I shoot, part of it is how I interact with the subject and when I pull out of the subject. But I just became really focused on creating covers that sold. And I've had numerous publication editors tell me that the covers I shot for them became their best selling covers. And that right there, that was the honor. It's like, because then we did our job. The job wasn't just to make a great cover. The job was to make a cover that sold more units.
That's incredible. Like, you're amazing. Like,
Thank you so much. I'm honored by that. Thank you.
And if you're in the fitness industry, you need to check out his conference, because he truly helps. Like, he could be out helping photographers, teaching photographers, but he is helping the actual talent get business and help you create your brand. So Fitposium is definitely a conference that you need to check out if you want to be a fitness entrepreneur. So definitely check that out. Tell us about, I'm sure your work is stolen daily,
Yeah.
but
Yeah. Okay. So there are times when it's funny, and it's like I had an image that I shot that got used in like a weekly newspaper. So it was featured in the Tucson Weekly for a phone sex ad.
oh my
And
gosh.
it was funny because it wasn't even a sexy photo. It was like a fashion photo, like shot outdoors, where the person was wearing like literally a full length skirt, like down to her ankle skirt, and a sweater. Like this was not a sexy photo. It was shot for a fall magazine fashion spread, a fall magazine fashion spread. But somehow the photo got pulled off the internet and got used in a phone sex ad. But here's the problem: is I don't know who to call because I don't want to call the number that's on the ad, right? Because I don't want to
Yeah.
pay $1.50 a minute to try to get my payment for. So that's a funny example. Then there are the examples where it's completely accidental and there's an opportunity there. And I'll give an example of that. I had a magazine long time ago, maybe 10 years ago, run one of my photos, and they thought it was another photographer. So they credited a different photographer. And so there's a full page photo of mine with another photographer's credit. So like double whammy, right? One, they used this photo without my permission. Two, they credited the wrong photographer. So anyone that sees it thinks someone else shot it. I guess three is I didn't get paid for anything. So
Right.
so triple whammy. So I reached out to the editor of this magazine. I said, and this was actually early in my career. And I says, hey, this happened, and I want you to know about this. And I was actually kind of mad. And they sent me the most sincerest apology. Like they were so devastated that this happened. And they said, we'll print a retraction in the next issue. We'll pay for what we would pay normally for a full page photo. Like they were really, really apologetic, and they owned it.
Well, that's good.
Of course. But that right there, Andrea, that turned into one of the best relationships with a magazine I've ever had. And for the
Oh.
next 10 years, I shot every single one of that magazine's covers. And the editor of that magazine, to this day, she and I are still very dear friends. She was one of the first editors to give me a really big break in this industry. Okay.
Aw.
I remember because I told her, I says, okay, I appreciate the apology. I've made mistakes. And I told her a quip of when I was a journalist, I accidentally had this big flub where I was editing someone else's story in a newspaper. It was a sports story. And I was eating pie at the time, and I love pie. And I made the mistake of writing what I was thinking. Just as a joke, I typed pie into the story, but I forgot to delete pie. So the article read something like, Kirk Sanders ran for 120 yards, pie, and 2 touchdowns. And that went to press. And it was very embarrassing. I got in a lot of trouble for it. And I shared that story with her, and they created this amazing connection and bond. So there was a very silver lining there.
I just want to harp on that for a second, because that's where it gets tricky for me as an attorney. And I love how you handled that. And I love how they handled it as well, because my clients have photos stolen, they have work stolen all the time. And the first thing I tell them to do, especially if they don't have a ton of money to spend, I say, look, you reach out yourself, educate, and let them know that it's infringement.
Mm-hmm.
And most of the time they are very apologetic.
Yep.
And then I tell them, look, you reach out, educate, and then if they still tell you screw you or they ignore you, then you can get me involved. Because in your situation, James, if you would have had an attorney involved right away, I can guarantee that, you wouldn't have the relationship with them that you do today. So it's right. Like they wouldn't say, oh, great. Well, let's, how can we make this great relationship with a photographer? Of course, they would have been apologetic, but it just would have taken a completely different turn.
Mm-hmm.
And you may not have the career that you have today. So I just want to use this as a moment to teach the audience, when this happens, don't immediately think, oh, I'm going to sue them and get all this money. I almost always tell my clients when they come to me with this issue, I tell them, reach out yourself, educate, and let them know that it's copyright infringement. And then, maybe they're very apologetic and you don't have to spend money with me to send them a cease and desist letter, and you can handle it yourself.
Then there are the times where it's not.
Yes. Now I think you have some of those.
Yeah, because, okay, so I will say this, like on this topic, if it's the media, and when I say the media, editorial usage, so it was used in an editorial sense, not in a commercial sense, not in an advertising sense. All right, so this was a magazine that had used a photo, so like magazines, newspapers, etc. Let's contrast that to advertising. Advertising, number one, my usage rates for advertising is different. Taking the same photo, if I shoot it for a magazine, there's less usage rates versus if I shot that same photo for an advertisement. Reason being is the advertisement is being used for monetary purposes. They're trying to sell whatever product that is. So that image is worth significantly more. Okay. So I've done ad campaign shoots that are in the high five figures, and I've done longer editorial shoots that are just a couple $100s. Okay. So it's not about time. It's about the use of the photo, where the photo is being used, how it's being used, how many people it's being served to, and really what is being sold in it. So when I say editorial, like if one of my images gets run editorially without my permission, more often than not, it's a mistake and they're willing to own up to that mistake. Okay. More often than not, because most editors are like the nicest people in the world. I really have to say that. Now, advertising, I don't know if I've ever had a good experience of one of my images being stolen for an ad and the result I was able to get from it. In my industry, the biggest offenders are supplement companies. So like protein companies, pre-workout companies, fat burner pills, things like that. Okay. The biggest one I had was I had one of my images taken, used on a full page ad on the back cover of Star magazine. The back cover.
That's insane. Like, that's huge. Like, that is huge.
They must have spent north of, I would imagine, $25,000, if not more, for that ad spot. So they paid all that money for that ad spot, and that is my photo.
What was the photo of? Was it a person?
It was a photo of a person, and this is what happens. I photograph a person. The person then gives their photo away to other companies because they want to appear in ads, not realizing that they should be being paid for that as well, that that's their likeness being used in a commercial sense. And so this person gave away this photo because they probably got free protein powder.
Yeah.
But that photo should have yielded them several $1,000s minimum in a usage fee, and should have yielded me a significant paycheck in a usage fee as well. Okay. Yeah. Now, that was an egregious usage, and the company could care less. They were like, oh, we'll send you some free product. I'm like, thanks. So that's an extreme. I've had my ads pop up in supplement advertising all the time. It happens all the time, and it's always the same path. The image usually isn't stolen offline. It's usually I photographed someone, and they gave the photo away, not knowing, one, that they didn't have the right to give the photo away.
Right.
And two, that they should have been paid for it as well.
Yeah, and I actually have this issue with boutique owners, clothing store owners. They'll hire a photographer to take their photos, and then they come to me and they're like, hey, the photographer's using my photos to showcase their work. I didn't tell them they can do that. I'm like, hold up, sister. You barely have permission to use the photos for your purposes. Then I explain, like, whoever takes the photo, typically that's the person that owns the copyright. And then whenever you hire a photographer, you are only hiring them for a license. You do not own those photos unless they assign the rights to you. And if they do, you're going to be paying a pretty penny.
Nail on the head. When you hire a photographer, you are not purchasing the photos. You are purchasing a scope of rights to use the photos. And this is what's important, is every photographer is different. And it's important, if listeners of the show, like you have entrepreneurs listening to the show, you're hiring a photographer, it is important to discuss what you can and cannot do with the photos for the investment you're making in the photos. And that will just shift the cost in the photo. So like and I'll just give an example. If a client comes to me and says, okay, we need some photos done and we just want to use them on our website. Okay, here's the investment required for me to take these photos and for you to use them on their website. If they say, okay, we want to use these photos on our website and we want to run full page ads in Entrepreneur Magazine and Forbes Magazine, the cost is going to go up. Yeah. And the reason the cost goes up is because you're using it differently. Okay, it's a usage fee. And so it's just important to have these conversations when you're hiring someone of what is the usage on this. And oftentimes photographers will put a limit on the usage. For example, like within my company, and every photographer is different, within my company, my average usage term is 3 years. I do about 3 years. Okay. I used to do 2 years, but clients were like, oh, I don't want to renew my license after 2 years. So we bumped it to 3 just to take care of our clients. So we license images for 3 years. And after 3 years, we'll go back to our clients and ask, do you want to relicense these photos? And to relicense them usually is less unless they want to shift what they're using the license for. They want to increase or decrease the license, but we give them that opportunity. Okay. Now, this is how commercial photographers build residual income also. Okay. So you just ask. Now, sometimes, like if you're an independent, like let's say you're an influencer, you're an online influencer, more often than not, you're going to get one of two types of usage fee. You're going to get non-commercial, non-transferable use, which means you can use the images to promote you, yourself, or anything you create. So non-commercial, meaning you can't sell the images, and non-transferable, you can't give them to anyone else. They're for you. Or you could hire a photographer to take publicity photos. Okay, so I get hired for publicity photos a lot. Publicity photos would impute that you can transfer these rights, but for publicity only, editorial use only. Okay, so have these conversations with the people you're hiring, and that way you're not going to put yourself in these circumstances.
Yes, I love this. I love everything that you're saying because so many entrepreneurs, very, very few understand this.
What makes it more complicated is many photographers don't know this now either.
Yes, that's the main issue is photographers don't know. And I get it. Like they pick up a camera and they can learn on YouTube, but you have to protect your art. A lot of photographers don't realize what rights they have when they're creating this art.
It opened up my eyes once I started to learn what a photographer could get paid in a usage fee. Like, for example, a photographer being able to shoot this, and not even shoot, being able to license an image. So it's an image that they've already taken. So it's all I'm doing right now, by the way, in the downturn in the economy. What I'm doing right now is I'm licensing previous work I've done. Magazines are licensing my work. Commercial companies are licensing my work. We're not being sent out to photograph stuff because, well, people are worried about infection. Okay, yeah. So let's see what this library of 20 years as a photographer, let's pick and choose what you have. We'll just license usage. And I'm learning that certain commercial companies, like there are companies that will license things in the six figures.
Yeah.
So it's like, I'm not even going out and doing work. I'm just sending out a photo. I'm emailing something and I'm making six figures. What a great place to be in. But it's because we control our assets. And that is so important. We control our creative assets in this.
Yeah. And that's what I really try to educate my clients on is intellectual property, copyrights, trademarks, patents. Whether you realize it or not, it is probably your most valuable asset. And you have to do what you can to protect those assets. And once you get the necessary protection in place, you can just get passive income, you get the recurring revenue, and you just have to realize that even though, you may be very active in your business, there are ways to create recurring revenue, passive income with what you already have. You just have to get the proper systems in place.
That's it. Because this came early to me where it was, I had a year as a photographer when I was in that hustle mode. Okay. And when I say hustle mode, it means I'm not an entrepreneur, I'm a freelancer. There's a difference.
Oh, yeah.
An entrepreneur gets paid even when they're not working. A freelancer only gets paid when they show up. Okay. That's the difference. Okay.
I love that.
A freelancer, like I only get paid when I go out and take photos. There was a year I shot, no joke, 500 individual photo projects in a year.
Oh.
I was shooting an average of a project and a half a day.
Oh.
Okay. Now, granted, there were days I had 8 projects in a day. Okay, so that floated stuff, and that's how I was able to do so much. But I was physically exhausted. Like I was sick all the time. I was struggling by the end of that year. And the money was good at the time, but it was like, it's nowhere near what I do now. And I work less hours now. Like I would never I can't even fathom doing that now. But to shift outside of that and realize that there's equity in licensing, there's equity in making income without tying your time to it. Because what if I get sick? I can't show up if I'm sick. What if I get injured? I can't go take photos if I'm injured. What happens then? When you're young and when you're early in your career, you're like, oh, I'll worry about it later. No, because look at what we're dealing with right now. Later's right now, by the way. Right now.
Yep.
Right now, I do not have a single client who will hire me to go out and take photos. It is not going to happen. It's not going to happen for at least another month or two.
Yep.
But I'm not worried at all. And the reason I'm not worried at all, it's not to brag, but it's because I've built a system where I can create income without tying my time to that income.
Yes. Yes. And that's every entrepreneur's dream. That is, I'm going to say that is the new American dream, is making money when you don't even have to show up.
New normal.
Yeah, exactly. And I love how you've explained all of this. And not even just like with the licensing standpoint, but how you're able to continue making money during this time, especially when people are freaking out, not knowing. Like, I've been telling a lot of my clients who are online business owners, like, we're killing it right now because we're flexible. We don't have to physically be somewhere to make money. But you take that even a step further and say, I don't even have to work with a client right now. I'm just using old work to make money, which is amazing. And one thing that I'm really trying to get a lot of coaches to realize is certification programs. It's almost the same thing. It is essentially the same as yours. It's licensing. You create a certification, certify coaches, and you make them pay every couple of years. And that's passive income for you.
I love that idea. I'm actually writing that down.
Yeah. And it's something I'm really trying to push with a lot of clients, because they have amazing coaching that they do, and they can train other people to become coaches and make money on their own. So create your own certification, trademark the certification.
There it is. I was going to ask, how do you protect it? Trademark the certification. Got it.
Trademark the certification, copyright all the content, and then you present that to the clients. You certify them, and then, of course, they pay for the certification, and then they pay yearly in order to maintain that certification.
I have a question for you surrounding photo rights. So I could fall into one or two modalities, and I usually fall into one and I avoid the other. The modality I fall into is I don't look for issues, and because I don't look for issues, I almost never see issues, right? So the other modality is, if I jumped on Google right now and I started searching, I would find over 100 illegal uses of my photos. I guarantee it. I guarantee it. It would not take me long, and I would find so many uses. I don't look for it because my idea is, if I don't see it, it doesn't hurt me.
Right.
Every now and then, and I guarantee if I did this search, most of the uses right now are probably going to be fake companies overseas using my photos for scam advertising. So like fat burner pills, but they're out of Ukraine, or waistbands that make you get 6-pack abs, and they're using a photo I took of a guy with 6-pack abs, but they're in, Russia or somewhere like that. I mean, is there any recourse, or is it just best to just ignore that stuff because there's no gold at the end of that tunnel?
I mean, there's definitely recourse. I have a team of professionals that is actually out there monitoring clients' copyrighted works, whether it's photos, designs. We are monitoring that for the clients, because you would be mad if you saw everywhere your work was being used. Same thing with my clients. It just makes them sick to see where their work is being used. So we do that for them. We find it and we get it removed from the internet. And then we actually will send out cease and desist letters, try to get settlement payments for our clients for past use. If need be, we take it a step further and discuss, whether litigation is necessary. I mean, for the overseas companies, litigation, that would typically just be a waste of time.
Good luck.
But yeah, a lot of times it's worth the discussion if they're in the same country.
I want to share a funny story of a time I got one of those letters. I think I was maybe 18 or 19. I had just gotten a camera. I was just into photography. And I'm just having so much fun. So one of the things I did was I made fake movie posters. It was the way that I was teaching myself photography and teaching myself graphic design simultaneously, and photo editing, right? So I made a bunch of fake movie posters using my photos. Okay. I may have used a trademarked logo in one of the movie posters, but it's a fake movie poster. I'm creating something completely fake. I got a cease and desist from United Artists. United Artists saw one of my, because I posted it on my blog. I was like, hey, look at these fake movie posters I made. And it was fake James Bond movie posters, by the way. So I think it was the 007 logo with the gun was the trademark infringement. And I had it like blended in the background to like create that really like hyper edited, action packed poster. And I got a letter from the lawyers of United Artists asking me to cease and desist. And I had to call them, and I'm talking to this lawyer, and I'm like 19-year-old shaking in my underwear. And I'm like in my college dorm, like, what is this? Why did I get this letter? And
oh my God.
And the lawyer at the other end of the line is like, I'm sorry. He's like laughing. He's like, this should not be a thing, but we would prefer if you didn't use the logo. I'm just like, okay.
Oh my.
Like, he was like, yeah, I get this is a waste of my time too, but yeah, you probably shouldn't use the logo. I was like, okay, it's been taken down.
Yeah, I mean, and even that situation, like I have those situations as well where it's like, listen, we're not going to get any money from these people, but the client still wants a letter to be sent. That way they're either scared like you were, like, holy crap, what is this? Or where they're just like, look, we need this taken care of, need it removed, or whatever the purpose is. But sometimes it is just a waste of our time, but the client wants it done. So
I have actually a serious question. That's something that I've been curious about.
Okay.
So I can copyright my photos. Okay. I mean, I know I own the intellectual copyright of my photos the second I take them, but I can actually get further protection for damages by copywriting all my images. Now, here's something I've noticed more of a trend recently, and I think it's because I'm an educator as well. But what I've noticed is people copying my exact photos. Now, when I say copying my exact photo, it's like another photographer recreating my exact image. That doesn't bother me so much. I mean, it irks me a little bit. But if I'm teaching people how to do it, they're going to try doing it, right? So there's that. Here's where it bothers me. There are other photographers who are selling their services as an educator who are teaching what I taught them how to do, in a sense of they're recreating my images and teaching it as if they created it themselves. That I'm curious about. And I don't know. I'm not sure because like I see it. I'm like, wow, you're making money teaching what I do, not what you do, what I do. That I've always found kind of interesting. And it's just surfaced in the last year or so.
Yeah, so it honestly depends like what exactly you're teaching them. How are they teaching it? If it's just like they're teaching the same concepts as you, then that's probably not infringement.
Mm-hmm.
But if you have this full curriculum and they're using your curriculum, then that's probably infringement.
Interesting. Yeah.
And that's what I'm thinking. Like this whole time, I'm like, okay, I know he has the mastermind and does a lot of educating for the fitness industry, but why aren't you teaching photographers?
So I launched that, and I launched that in late 2018, early 2019. I launched a whole program to teach photographers, but the reality was I would not say it did great. And the reason I don't think it did great was not the content. It's because I've not ever been known as an educator for artists. That brand has not grown up enough, and I don't have enough of an audience to really sell that right now. Like my audience for over 15 years has been health, fitness, and wellness. So when I come out with a program to teach entrepreneurs, I can sell. When I come out with a program to help people within health, fitness, and wellness pivot, I can sell it. If it's to create a business in that industry, I can sell it. But when I came out with something where I'm like, okay, now I'm going to teach photographers and artists how to grow their careers, it sold, but it sold so far under our anticipation that we ended up shelving it because we're like, I need to grow the trust and the connection I have to that audience. I need to show up more. I need to serve more. I need to give more before I start asking for things. So we shelved that a little bit. We stopped hosting our workshops. We stopped putting money behind it, but I'm still showing up for that audience to create content, to pump out resources, but I'm not charging for it to build that trust and that engagement so that if I ever do decide to revisit that, I will have an audience that I have now a mature, trust-built relationship with them that I can show up and serve them better.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. I totally get it now. Yeah. Well, this has been absolutely amazing. Like I know the audience is just loving this.
I hope we added some value because, like, whenever I talk to you, I feel like I'm just, I mean, you're a friend, and so I feel like I'm just having a conversation with one of my best friends, which I am, which is great. But I hope we were able to put out some nuggets of inspiration or information that kind of help people really decide how to position themselves and what options they have.
Yeah, no, I think we have done an amazing job in this conversation, really learning about licensing, learning about how to make sure you have a proper license, and actually how to create the recurring revenue for yourself. So I really enjoyed this. Now, let's tie it up with a nice, pretty bow and tell the audience where they can find you.
Absolutely. So my website is jamespatrick.com. I am also the host of the Beyond the Image podcast, which, Andrea, we need to get you on that. You were on my other podcast. I need to get you on Beyond the Image, but everything else can just be found jamespatrick.com or on Instagram at jpatrickphoto.
Perfect. And it'll be linked in the show notes as well, if you guys are wondering about that as well. So thank you so much, James. I am so happy that we did this. This has been wonderful. Like, I know this is going to be a great episode.
I appreciate you so much.
I appreciate you. So if you're listening, make sure to screenshot this, tag both of us in your Instagram stories. Let us know what you liked most about this episode.
Oh, thank you, Andrea. I appreciate you so much and how you've been showing up for your audience. It is something that I admire so much. And I hope to always take a page out of your book and following your model and how you show up. You give so much. And I just want to express my gratitude to you.
Oh, you're the sweetest. I'm so glad we're doing this. Alrighty. I hope everybody has a wonderful day. Please tag us in your stories, and I will see you next time. Have a good one. If you found this information helpful, I would be so grateful if you could share it with a fellow business owner, and it doesn't cost anything to rate, review, or subscribe to the show. Your support helps me reach more listeners, which allows me to support more business owners in their entrepreneurial journey. I'll see you next episode.